Welcome to Cultivated Live for Friday, September 6th, 2024. My name is Jay Rosenthal. I'm the co-founder of Cultivated Media. I'm the host of this program, Cultivated Live, and we have a new segment which we are launching today, which is called Reporter's Notebook. It's produced in partnership with MJBiz. My first guest for this Reporter's Notebook is Omar Sacirbey.
Perfect.
Is it? Oh,
yeah.
then my whole day is complete, so I'm very excited about that. Omar, thank you for joining us today for the first installment. You're the guinea pig, I guess, for this segment, which we're going to run every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern. It's really aligned with what we like to do, which is to bring the industry the most important, insightful, useful, and timely information through, of course, our newsletter, but also through this stream, which is streaming on LinkedIn and YouTube. Omar, you are the editor of MJBizMagazine. You have a new magazine out this week. It's all about, I'll put words in your mouth. It's all about sort of politics and cannabis and the collision of the two. But before we dive into what's in the magazine, you tell a funny, interesting, and important, insightful story about Gatewood Galbraith.
Correct.
In 1991, he caught your attention. He was running for something in Kentucky. Give us a little bit, and then we can sort of talk about the 33 years hence.
Sure. Yeah, this goes, way back in 91. What was I? Maybe 23, 24, something like that. And I just had the news on. I believe it was CNN. I'm not completely sure. But there was this news segment about this guy running for governor of Kentucky, and central to his platform was cannabis legalization. And I couldn't believe it when I saw it. I was flabbergasted in a very positive way. And I was living with a couple of buddies, and I was like, let's go to Kentucky. Let's get in the van. I wanted to campaign for this guy. I wanted to knock on doors and talk about all the blessings of legalization, from, criminal reform to economic boosts, to farmers. And after about, a half hour of trying, I couldn't convince my buddies. We, gave it up. And Gatewood, as it turned out, I think he ended up getting 5% of the vote in a primary. And, he ran for a lot of things over the years. He ended up passing on in 2012, but he ran for House and I think some other high offices in Kentucky. Always did around 5%, not so great. But the thing was, I remember the news segment treated him sort of like a novelty, and admittedly, it kind of was. It was a time, and here we are. Was it 33 years? You said, and cannabis is anything but a novelty issue now. So I think that's pretty amazing what's happened over these last.
It's more than not a novelty. It's like, it seems to be, and we play close attention to it, but it is playing a role in the presidential race. And it's interesting because this week it's interesting we're talking, because it appears like the daylight between the two major party candidates is actually closing, where we have Kamala Harris, the vice president, of course, is push for reform, and she's part of the ticket that is bringing rescheduling hopefully soon. But Donald Trump is on the other side and has been non-vocal, let's say, or at least against, or the party has. But even this week, there were rumblings that he was supporting, I'll use that word loosely, Amendment 3 in Florida, and then gave more supportive statements about medical cannabis in a subsequent interview. That's a big gap to close in 33 years, but it's even a big gap to close this week between major party candidates talking about it on the campaign trail. So from Galbraith to Trump, that's a big gap to fill, and a lot of it's filling in real time. Like, is that exciting to cover from your perspective?
Oh, it's super exciting. I've always enjoyed covering politics, even when I wasn't covering cannabis. And so when you have a chance to cover politics and cannabis at the same time, it's really, for, I think, many of us, a reporter's dream. When it comes to Trump and the statements that he's made over the last few days regarding cannabis legalization and Florida, I think it is super interesting. In our magazine issue that just came out a couple of days ago, our reporter Chris Roberts, I think, described it beautifully, where up until these last few days, Trump's policy could best be described as beneficial neglect. He kind of ignored the issue, and it didn't really help cannabis, but it certainly didn't hurt it. And the advances that cannabis was making while Trump was in office, several states legalized, and either through the ballot box or through the legislature. He didn't get in the way of that. I suppose it would have been hard, although he could have tried, but he didn't get in the way of that. So like Chris Roberts described, it was a policy of beneficial neglect. That took a big change, though, I think, this weekend. I think it was on Saturday when he said that he expects Amendment 3 in Florida to pass, and that if that's the will of the voters, then he hopes the legislature will lay out rules that so that legalization there is done correctly, so it won't smell in public. I think that seemed to be his biggest concern, was the aroma. But in any case, it's a big jump. It's a positive jump. Personally, I think it's a play by Trump to get some of those Amendment 3 voters in Florida to vote for him. I think he is worried about losing Florida. A poll from the first half of August had him up by about 5 percentage points, which is certainly in striking distance for Kamala Harris. And there were also two very recent polls, or at least some reporting done by Florida Politics over the last couple of days, that came out and said that Harris is handedly ahead in Miami-Dade County and Palm County, where they have been traditional Democratic strongholds, but the last couple of elections they have lost a lot of voters to Trump or other Republicans, and she seems to be clawing some of that back. And so I think he's worried about that, and I think he's trying to get some voters, some of those marijuana voters, to vote for him.
Yeah, there's also an abortion measure in Florida to sort of enshrine abortion rights into the Constitution, and I think he knows he's not getting those voters back. So, are there voters that would split that ticket that I think he's trying to pull in? Interesting sort of play in Florida, but also with national implications as well on the issue. And obviously, this is playing against a backdrop of rescheduling, which we also heard news of this week, where there's going to be a ALJ, an administrative law judge, hearing on December 2nd, which those who follow cannabis closely know that's like the fly-in day for MJBizCon in Las Vegas. But like, talk about that, because that is also factoring into, certainly, if he believes this is going to be rescheduled before he would take office again if he were to win. Like, there's also this momentum that is generating outside of the political campaign that is about an issue that that the Biden administration has put forward and maybe coming to fruition before the end of the year, hopefully. So, like, it's not just Florida. There's other implications too, and certainly one with real policy implications, being rescheduling and the fall on of 280E. Like, how talk about sort of how you wrote about that in this month's magazine.
Yeah. Well, again, our reporter Chris Roberts did an excellent piece about the implications of Harris presidency for cannabis and the Trump presidency for cannabis. And like we said, with Trump, it would be probably best described as beneficial neglect. With Harris, she's been a lot more vocal about her support for cannabis, really more than any presidential candidate in the past, outside of Gatewood Galbraith, if he'd been running for president. But in any case, she's been very full-throated about this. I think a lot of cannabis stakeholders feel positive that if she were elected, that rescheduling would happen. And I think the chances would certainly increase, although the DEA is a very tight-lipped, unpredictable agency, certainly has not shown any warmth towards cannabis. So it is not a guarantee by any means, but I think the chances improve. And if the DEA signs off on that, it really would be a game changer on multiple levels. Personally, I think the biggest change would come to 280E. Over the years, especially recently, with now that this talk of getting 280E eliminated is, a serious potential. cannabis businesses talk about this as they use this word, game changer. It'll take them from the red to the black. That, one stroke of the pen will turn many cannabis businesses from not profitable to profitable, or at least breaking even, which is a big thing nowadays, given how much cannabis businesses are struggling. So that by itself would be huge. I think people also believe, again, rightly, that a Harris presidency would also increase the likelihood that safer banking is passed, and that also would be a huge deal. I don't think it would perhaps be as huge of a deal as the elimination of 280E, but to have access to banking, to have access to credit, maybe even credit with reasonable terms. People are getting, being offered credit terms that are in the high teens, low 20s, which is ridiculous. There are better terms can be obtained, but it is difficult. There's not many places that are offering them. But again, safer banking would be it would be greatly advanced by that. And again, I think the biggest thing there is cannabis companies being able to get credit or loans or debt at perhaps reasonable rates. And then, it would have a big impact for research. We can finally do some serious research. Frankly, I'm surprised it hasn't happened already, because we do have that, I think, with so many states legalizing, I think there would be more of a push for research, but some serious research. Everybody knows that, we don't want, young teens smoking cannabis. We know that. But how about, what does it do for cancer? What does it do for autism? What does it do, anti-inflammatory? People die from so many things, but the anti-inflammation is sort of the binder to all that, So what does cannabis have to do with anti-inflammatory process? There's so much that can be gained from rescheduling, and I think people feel that a Harris presidency would be it would increase the likelihood of that a lot more than a Trump presidency.
Thinking about sort of, and reading through the magazine, think about, like, let's call them down ballot or more down ballot races. Like, what else are you keeping your eye? Are there like 2, 3, 4, 5 races that you're looking at as we roll into November? And now post Labor Day, we're in like prime political season, that you and the team are keeping your eyes on, that will have an impact, benefit or not, but an impact on sort of cannabis, either on the state and local level, or people coming to Washington that could be, strong advocates as well?
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of interesting races out there. Our latest magazine issue, we actually do a big section about that, where we sort of picked out 20 races that we thought were interesting to write about. 4 of them were in the Senate, 16 of them were in the House. And we could have picked dozens of really interesting races. There's a lot, but we only have so much time and space. But I think one race that I think is interesting is the race in Portland, Oregon, to replace Congressman Blumenauer, who has been a big perhaps the biggest advocate in Congress for cannabis. It's an open seat. We have a Democrat from the state legislature there vying against a Republican there, who's we don't know too much about either of their positions, but I think the sense is that the Democrat would be better for cannabis there. There's another interesting race out of I think I had jotted it down, California's 41st district, where it's actually a rematch of a race a couple years ago, where you have Ken Calvert from the GOP, who's the incumbent, going up against a federal district attorney named Will Rollins, who just fairly recently, maybe like in the last 3 or 4 weeks, has come out in support of cannabis. Normal, the reform organization, had him earlier in the summer as no ratings. They didn't know his rating, but apparently they found out. They gave him an A. So he's come out in favor of the MORE Act, come out in favor of safer banking. And if he could flip that seat, that would be a big gain for cannabis, because Ken Calvert has opposed pretty much all the cannabis measures. There's another really interesting race out of Arizona's 6th district, where you have I think it's also a rematch, where you have the Democrat Karen Engel, who again is very vocal about her support of cannabis, saying things along the lines, I want, I think we should legalize federally the way the way Arizona has legalized medically. Again, very vocal against a prohibitionist incumbent whose name is Juan Ciscomani. If Karen Engel could flip that seat, that'd also be a big gain for cannabis. I think one of the things that's interesting to point out is that a Democratic-controlled House of Representatives would be better for cannabis. It would be great for cannabis if Kamala Harris could get elected, but she couldn't do it on her own. She would need the support of Congress. And even though there are a lot of, or a good number of Republicans that support cannabis reform, Nancy Mace, the sponsor of the MORE Act, or the author of the MORE Act, comes to mind. Unfortunately, if we had to decide which party is a stronger, advocate for cannabis reform, it would be the Democrats. And so if they can control the House, I think that would make legalization or rescheduling or some other types of reforms a lot more like. And they're only 4 votes away from flipping the House. So if Engel can beat Ciscomani, if Will Rollins can beat Culver, you get a couple of other flips that we've written about in the magazine. You could have a very different landscape. Also in the Senate, there's a couple of really interesting races there. I jotted them down. In Nebraska, which I think is super interesting, you have Deb Fischer, who is super anti-cannabis, going against an independent named Dan Osborne, who has come out as very pro-cannabis. We also have a big race. Let me pull that one out. In Michigan, where they're trying to replace an open seat that was vacated by Debbie Stabenow. And there you have Alyssa Slotkin, a state house rep, who's been, again, very vocal for her support. I'm sorry, she's in the U.S. House of Reps vying for Senate now, very vocal for cannabis reform, going against a prohibitionist opponent. So, John Tester is in a tough fight in Montana. He's been good for cannabis. We're hoping he can hold on. But there's a lot of interesting races going on out there.
Never a dull moment. I want to wrap up with a focus on Florida because aside from Texas, it's really the last big state to consider legalization, and it's on the ballot. It needs 60% to vote. We talked about sort of how the impacts on the presidential race and what Donald Trump said this week. The other factor that I think is different and apart and maybe unique of the 33 years we talked about back at the beginning is that there are major players in cannabis putting major dollars into that race, to the tune of $50 or $70 million. There's major implications for companies down in Florida like Trulieve, who have major stakes in the state. That seems to be something different and apart from what we saw, say, when California legalized or Colorado, in that there are major players putting, real campaign dollars into these elections and swaying it. And that says nothing to the fact that the hemp industry is actually on the other side. There is big political dollars, like regular industries, playing in Florida, really unlike we've seen in other places. That is both unique, interesting to talk about, but also shows a different heft of the industry, I think. And you talk a little bit about it in the magazine.
Yeah, 100%. I think here is a good opportunity to use the word unprecedented. The amount of money that cannabis is putting into politics, particularly this election, is unprecedented, and it's amazing. Trulieve by itself, I think, has put in $70 million, which I can certainly understand putting money into something like this, but what is the return on investment going to be? I think that would be really interesting. But other companies have put in, not chump change, right? I think Verano put in a couple $1 million. There's been other one or two other big MSOs that have put in something, around $1 million or $500,000. And then they're also contributing to some individual political candidates. Nothing like what we're seeing in terms of the Florida referendum amendment 3, but still donating to individual candidates, which I think is fascinating. Our data reporter, Andrew Long, did a really fascinating piece with a lot of cool graphics and charts about what kind of money is going to individual candidates. But what's happened in Florida is mind-blowing. It was, I think, California, that ballot initiative, that was like a $36 million race, and we've more than doubled that, or roughly doubled that. And there's not a single, at least according to, I think it's Open Secrets, a great organization that we use to report this election issue. They reported that there's not a single other referendum issue anywhere in the country that has brought in so much cash. And that's amazing when you think about some of the issues that are being voted on in other states. So the political clout that's being demonstrated, I think, is amazing. The fact that former President Trump reportedly met with some of the MSOs in Florida, I think speaks to a little bit about his potential turnaround, perhaps how desperate he is to get some of that marijuana. But maybe he wants some of Kim Rivers' money. She's not throwing around something either.
It seems to be pretty juicy in terms of the intersection of cannabis and politics and political money as well, when you talk about what's happening in Florida. Omar, I want to thank you, one, for a great issue of the magazine, because it's we're going to put a link to it, obviously, and people can read it online, because it's a great read, but also an important one. And I don't think it's overstating it that this election season will be sort of the most important cannabis election season ever. One, because it has presidential implications. Two, in the background, rescheduling. Three, a major state will or won't go. It needs to reach 60% threshold, and the money that's being spent, and the candidates on their ballot, and if you want to know more about it, read the magazine, because I think that's super important. And also, and I want to say this because the election is going to happen the first week in November. The MJBizCon is going to happen the first week in December. There's going to be no shortage of conversation about what the implications of that election are in Las Vegas the first week in December. So people, book your travel now, because it's going to get busy. It's going to get even more expensive to book your travel to get to MJBizCon. So we'll put a link about how to do that with some discount codes as well. Omar, thank you for joining us. This inaugural episode of Reporter's Notebook. We look forward to having you back.
Thanks. Great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And everybody, we will see you back here on Monday, 10 a.m. Eastern, right here on our LinkedIn channel and on YouTube. Follow and subscribe. Go to cultivated.news, get our newsletter in your inbox every day. Omar, thanks a lot. We'll see you around the bend.